Hey guys, this is Chip here from blackhatpoker.com, and today I'm going to review my secret stash of poker tactics, and this is the first part of a cash game series. So with that said, let's just get started. So the first mistake people are making is limping into a hand when first to act. The biggest mistake I see new players make is choosing to just call the big blind when entering a pot instead of opening for a raise. A good rule to follow when you are the first person to the pot is if your hand is not strong enough for a raise, then it should simply be folded. The reason for this raise or fold strategy comes from the fact that there are many problems that you will face later in the hand if you choose to limp, and many benefits you will gain from raising when you are the first player to enter the pot. You need to find the folds, and to find the folds with open limping you must first ask yourself which hands would I limp in with and why. If you are limping into the pots with marginal strength hands such as small pocket pairs and big suited cards, then your opponent will quickly pick up on this and easily adjust. Other players will start to charge you more money to see the flop by making pre-flop raises with their stronger hands, leaving you to either throw away your hand while slowly leaking away money every single time this occurs, or call the raise in plain inflated pot with a weak hand. Both of these options are losing players and avoidable by not limping in with marginal strength hands. Limping with strong hands. Limping in with stronger hands creates just as big of a problem as limping with the marginal hands did. If you limp a strong hand, you are not getting full value out of your hand by building a pot in early streets. Building a pot early sets up bigger bets on later streets, allowing you to get paid off fully when with your strong hand. Second, by limping yourself, you are inviting other limpers along for the ride, giving them a cheap option to outflop you, costing you the entire pot. Don't be scared. Beginning players are often afraid that raising will scare away their opponents and they will be left winning only the blinds with their big hands. But any experienced online player can tell you that this is not the case. More often than not, finding callers at low stakes online games is not difficult at all. Finally, it's worth a quick mention that limping in with low strength hands is certainly a losing play in itself. Though the low cost of paying only one big blind to catch a lucky flop is tempting, you are simply throwing away too much money every single time you miss the flop to make a profit doing this. And even when you do hit a lucky flop, you will often find yourself with the second best hand because your opponent's starting cards were much better than yours. Just stop doing this right now. The problems associated with limping into the pot should be reason enough to convince beginning players and yourself and even advanced players to quit this habit. So the best way to convince why is by showing you the benefits of raising when you are first to enter a pot. Why it's profitable to raise every hand you want to play? The best and most profitable reason for raising when you are first to enter a pot is that you have a pretty good chance of picking up the blinds without a fight. Only the most premium of hands have a long-term expected value higher than that of the value of the blinds. Therefore, when you pick up the blinds without having to see a flop, you have just made a very profitable play. But it has another big advantage. It disguises the strength of your hand. Always raising is also beneficial because it disguises the strength of your hand. If you always raise when first entering a pot, your opponent has no way of knowing if you are raising with a monster hand or have decided to raise with a more speculative hand. So he will be less inclined to re-raise you. This deceptive benefit is again useful on the flop, as now you can make a continuation bet regardless of your current hand strength. And this forces your opponent to fold most of his hands because you have represented a strong hand on two streets, which again makes it difficult for your opponent to play back at you. Now, we go to the second mistake that most people players make, underestimating the value of position. Being in position or less to act during a hand gives you a gigantic edge during the game. It is easier to bluff with your weaker hands and get value out of your made hands when you are in position as opposed to out of position. In addition to this, you can control how much money goes into the pot by acting last. This allows you to draw at a hand such as a straight or a flush cheaply, while charging your opponents the maximum to do the same. Valuable opponent intel and pot control. Excuse me. Position also gives you valuable information about your opponent's hands that he does not have about yours. However, my favorite part about position is the ability to easily control the size of the pot. Here's an example how this will work in your favor. Here's an example of ultimate pot control. I raise ace 10 offsuit on the button and the big blind calls. The flop comes down a favorable but scary ace king jack and my opponent checks. Here I would be happy to just check back and keep the pot small for a few reasons. First, I flopped a fairly strong hand of top pair good kicker, which I want to get the showdown. But there are a number of hands that make 2 pair or straight on this board that now have me in bad shape. So a bet on this flop would be dangerous, or can be dangerous. Second, if I bet and just get called, I will often have to deal with a scary turn card such as a king jack or a 10. This leaves me uncertain about if I have the best hand in the growing pot. Playing the hands by checking if the turn card is a bad one and my opponent decides to bet out, I can reevaluate the situation by just calling and seeing the river cheap, or simply fold my hand so that I have lost very little in the pot. If my opponent checks it, it's now time for me to bet, as he likely doesn't have my pair of aces beat. On the river I can continue to bet for value, this because I have disguised the strength of my hand, and now I may get called with lightly with a worse hand, something like a pair of aces with a weaker kicker, a pair of kings, or even a suspicious player with a pair of jacks. Now let's take one step back. Let's take a step back to the turn. The turn, if a safeguard such as a 2 or 9 hits the board and my opponent checks, I can bet the turn and river for value just like I did before. If he bets out at me this time, I can safely call relatively small turn and river bet just because my opponent may have decided to bluff, deciding I was weak after I checked the flop. Or he may even be value betting with a worse hand than mine. I'm able to control the action this easily and thoroughly, all due to the fact that I'm using position to my advantage by controlling when and how much money will enter the pot. Now let's reverse the roles. Let's look at the same hand out of position. My opponent raises on the button and I call from the big blind with ace 10. The flop comes down again, ace king jack rainbow, and I check. If I check and my opponent bets, I'm left guessing if I have the best hand or not. But with a pair of aces, I would likely decide it's not yet time to fold and just call. Regardless of the turn card, my opponent has a big advantage because he will have a few very good choices. He could give up on the pot if he was bluffing, having lost very little money, or he could decide to keep bluffing. By checking and calling on the flop, I have announced that I like, but I do not love my hand. A turn bet from my opponent could set up a large river bet from him, putting me in a position where I'm forced to either call him down with just one pair, or lay down my hand, which would usually be the correct play. The beauty of this from his point of view is that he could play a bluff and a very strong hand the exact same way. This leaves me in a very difficult spot with my ace 10. Of course, he could also decide to check the flop for pot control like we did, if he flop a marginal strength shown down a ball hand and continue to play the hand like I described before. So as you can see, in position you often have many very good options to play your hand profitably, while out of position you are often playing a guessing game. It's important to both punish your opponents when they are out of position against you, as well as avoiding being out of position yourself. Now let's look at the third big mistake I see most players make, and that's playing the ace. Falling in love with any ace is a mistake that many beginning players, but even more advanced players, make far too often. This mistake is often compounded with the first mistake, limping into the hand, creating a potentially disastrous situation. Hands that contain an ace with a weak kicker should often be folded before the flop, and occasionally be played cautiously if you are in position. The major problem with small aces is that if you hit your ace and your opponent does not have one as well, you are likely to only win a small pot. However, you may be outkicked. Because if he has a big pair of aces, has a pair of aces with a bigger kicker than yours, you are setting yourself up to lose a big pot. It is important to recognize that an ace on the flop is the ultimate scare card. Even beginning players are very aware that most players would like to play hands containing an ace in it. So the action will often slow down on flops with an ace on it. Players also tend to play much more straightforwardly when an ace flops. So here's a tough spot example. Let's say you decided to call on a raise with ace-7 offsuit and the flop comes down, ace-9-3 rainbow. That's about as favorable of a flop you can realistically hope for, but how do you proceed? If your opponent continues to bet the flop, it's hard to fold when you hit your best card, so that should not be considered. You're practically screwed when this happens, because raising is an option, but if your opponent has you beat, he will at least call. Or maybe even re-raise you, putting you in an even more difficult spot. If he was bluffing, he can easily fold his hand, having lost very little. So you're now stuck calling his flop bet, even though if you are beat, it may now be hard to get away from his hand without losing more money on later streets. But if you are ahead, your opponent is unlikely to continue bluffing with that scary ace on board, and you stand to win just a small pot. It's really easy to avoid this. Avoiding spots like this is an easy and important part of winning poker. Folding marginal strength holdings such as weak aces early in a hand will save you money and keep you out of difficult situations, those that will cost you money in the long run. Now let's go to the fourth big mistake I see most players make, and that's playing too many trap hands. Trap hands can be defined as big card hands that are easily dominated before the flop. These hands are ace-jack, ace-10, king-queen, king-jack, king-10, king-queen, queen-jack, queen-10 and jack-10. The difficult aspect of these hands to beginners is that they are all fairly strong hands that should be played some of the time, particularly in precision, but will cost you a lot of money if you play them too often or too aggressively. Don't be too tight, and I'm going to raise a big question here. So anyway, if you always fold these hands, you're playing way too tight. You simply can't sit around and wait to play just aces or kings, because the blinds will slowly eat away more money than those hands would make a profit. Now, the question becomes, how do you know when it's okay to play these hands and when they should simply be folded before the flop? That's a good question, but you have to hold tight, because there's more to come. We're about halfway through all the common mistakes beginners and even advanced players make. But in our next video I answer the big question we just raised, and I'll reveal a lot more mistakes and of course easy fixes. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please do leave your comments below. I really appreciate all of them, and well, obviously also try to answer them all too. Anyway, thanks for watching, and till the next time.